Yeah, we can see the.
Yeah, you can see the screen. Yes, it's happening.
There.
So shall I continue?
1 minute, 1 minute. Let it start.
Okay, sir.
I think the number of people are also increasing. So.
Oh yeah, it's evidence.
Good. So it's gone live. So. Prakriti, all yours now. You can start.
Okay, sir. So good evening again to everyone present here. I'm Prakriti Mehta, third year CEZ, and I welcome you all to the web discussion titled Conversations on Conservation, organized by the Department of Environmental Science. We have two speakers for the day, Mr. Gopakumar Menon and Mr. Raghav Gupta. Before we proceed, I would like all the participants to kindly keep their audios and videos switched off throughout the event. Kindly avoid leaving and rejoining the meeting frequently. Any questions you have can be posted in the chat box during the question and answer session, and please avoid spamming the chat box with unnecessary messages. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. B.S. Prabhakar, the HOD of Department of Environmental Science, to introduce the speakers of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Prakriti. This definitely is an honor to me to introduce two very interesting people. One I've known for a very long time, and the other person I came to know very recently, but we have already started talking like we know each other for a long time. First, I will introduce Mr. Raghav Gupta. Since I know Gopa for a long time, I'll put him a little late. I'll take that liberty. Mr. Raghav Gupta, I came to know him in a very interesting manner. Mount Carmel College had a webinar organized the other day, and Mr. Raghav Gupta was the presenter there. I was looking at his videos and the way he was presenting and his knowledge about the ecosystems also, apart from just the photography. I thought this would be the person who must be interacting with our students and also people who are interested in wildlife. So I contacted him, and in the first discussion itself, he quickly agreed, and he said, yes, this must happen with students. And it was I would say it was a very good interaction for the first time person who is contacting him. Thank you for that approach, sir. That gave me a lot of confidence to talk to you further. I will now tell a few things about him. Mr. Raghav Gupta is in the Indian Revenue Service, and he was in Bombay for a long time. Now he is in Kanpur, and he is the alumnus of St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He passed out of the place in 2009. Then he received a master's degree in taxation and business law from Nalsar. All of you will know the place, from Hyderabad. Then he pursued his advanced diploma in international taxation from Chartered Institute of Taxation, London. And what's inspiring and little disturbing to me, because I could not do that, also inspiring the younger generation, is that he is a person who got the 102nd rank in the civil services examination of 2011, and currently is posted as the Deputy Director of Income Tax Investigation in Kanpur. And yeah, that's what a person can do. In spite of all of this, I was more interested in his love for nature photography and the kind of information he was able to communicate to us as part of that webinar. And what I was impressed with both of the speakers today is that both of them are not into wildlife as a profession, but they have contributed to the profession of wildlife quite immensely. I would rate them as any other person who is professionally in the field of wildlife. And for a lot of reasons, that's a very good thing, that somebody who is in some other profession and still contributing to wildlife is a very interesting thing to me, also quite productive from the wildlife perspectives. And to continue with Mr. Gupta, he is a life member of Bombay Naturalist Society. He also writes in Sanctuary Asia, the Hindu newspaper, and a couple of other publications. He was recently appointed as the advisory member of ERDS Foundation, which is involved in the conservation of great Indian bustards. And See, the learning of the person, in spite of being in that position, you know how difficult it is. And every time I have spoken to him in the evening, he would still be in office 7:30, 8 o'clock. In spite of that, he was able to finish a comprehensive course in ornithology offered by the Cornell University during the lockdown period. And he is also taken part and completed courses in exploring conservation by the National Geographic. He is also a person who is interested in, of course, photography. Apart from that, he is interested in Egyptology, astronomy. He writes poetry, also teaches. So that's a very modest, very brief introduction about Mr. Raghav. Now I will take the pleasure of introducing Gopa. A lot of you, I mean, a lot of students of the college must have seen Mr. Gopa already coming to college a couple of times. He is on the Board of Studies of Environmental Science. Also, he had been in the Governing Council of Commerce College some time ago. And why I'm interested in Gopa in today's discussion is that he's a corporate trainer by profession. He specializes in something called leadership and negotiation. Both I think I should learn someday. And he runs, apart from his profession there, he runs a foundation called Nityata Foundation, which works in river otter conservation in 3 landscapes of Karnataka. Apart from this, he also teaches economics. I know that he's been teaching economics with Value School for a fairly long time. And finding time to teach economics is something which I would be interested in. Apart from this, Gopa was a gold medalist from Indian Institute of Management, Bengaluru. He also studied in St. Joseph's College of Commerce. That is a pleasure for us because we are from the institution. And with this little introduction, I don't want to spend more time. I don't want to take your time away from the speakers. I will just introduce the format of the discussion today, and then we can, without wasting time, we can quickly continue. This will be the overview. I have kind of finished introducing the speakers now, but they will talk among themselves. That will help you to know more about them. And that discussion will be focused on how they came into wildlife and how the contributions are done and what are the pressures they're facing, that kind of material. Then they will talk about wildlife research and photography. That's between 2 of them. They will share the material. After that, we will have an interaction session. We would say the introduction of the speakers would take about 10 minutes, another 20 minutes for the part 2. And then we will have interactive session wherein you all can unmute yourselves and ask questions. I would say you can put it on the chat box also. And before you're putting on the chat box, kindly see if they've asked, if somebody else have asked the same question, you could avoid that repetition of the question. But you are also welcome to ask a question. We would possibly take about 4 questions. And if the questions are maybe yes or no type, maybe we'll take another question more. But otherwise, we want to limit it to 4 questions. After that, there will be a little session on what we called as being a wildlifer. And then we will look at the best practices in the conservation of wildlife. And then we have another interactive session. Of course, after that will be vote of thanks and we will end the program. That's the kind of schedule that we have. When I say end the program, this formal program will be coming to an end, but our speakers have been graceful enough to give us their mail IDs at the end of it's already in the presentation. We can always communicate to them and keep our discussions alive. And in the discussions for today, I have a what shall I say, a queer thing to tell you, possibly request you. Let us keep the questions limited to the framework of today's talk. Let's not go beyond this particular issue, because in the last couple of webinars that I have participated and presented, 2 questions have always been common. What is your take on India's education policy? And what do you think about impact assessment policy that the government is doing? Possibly these kind of questions we could avoid because that's not in the purview of the discussion today. And now the floor is open to the speakers. I would request Mr. Raghav and Mr. Gopakumar Menon to please take over. And of course, I will move the slides from here. Thank you, sir. Please take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Prabhakar, and thank you, Gopaji. It's such a pleasure, Dr. Prabhakar, for such a humbling introduction. I can only say that. And Gopaji, it's a pleasure to get to know you and get to know your work. In fact, I would like to start, by asking you some questions which I would get to know you better. I'm sure the audience would love to get to know you better too. So as we just saw, your profile, economics, management graduate, and it's so much of accomplishment, and then we see wildlife. So how does that work? How did that happen? The passion towards wildlife, when did that transform, or when did that come into your life?
Yeah, Raghav, thanks a million. I mean, the couple of conversations we've had prior to this have been so lovely. So briefly, and of course, good afternoon, everyone on this conversation. So Raghav, the sort of answer to your question in about 2 minutes is, I, like many others on this call, I was always very interested in wildlife, but more as a lay person. Many of us visit national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, we see species, we take photographs now from the mobile, but probably from very elementary devices, not necessarily as professional as you are. But at some point, I have a lot of friends from conservation, and I used to volunteer a little bit with a couple of NGOs. And then I wanted to do a little more. I wanted to stop becoming a visitor and become something more, contribute a little more. And I had a very good friend at that time, and he gave me a very sensible piece of advice, which in turn, because he gave it to me, I would like to, with your permission, Raghav, I would like to pass it on to many people in this audience. He said, look at conservation, A, and B, look at species that are outside the sort of megafauna and charismatic set. So he asked me to not look at anything to do with tigers, or not that I would have been able to do it, but he said, if you're looking at any conservation initiative, look at species that is outside the sort of megafauna, the larger species, and outside something that is very charismatic. Initially, this was a little bit of a disappointment because because elephants were my favorite, like lots of people on this call, right? But in brackets, I would also like to say I was terribly scared of them, right? I was really scared, and I couldn't imagine doing anything, spending weekends trying to work on a species which you're really frightened of at some level.
Right.
But what really got me interested was when I saw my first otter in the wild. And we will talk about that maybe when we talk about otters. So that is in a nutshell, my path. And it was always parallel to my corporate career. I had a full-fledged corporate career before striking out on my own.
Right.
But I want to in turn ask you, Raghav, I mean, how did it work for you? I mean, of course, you come from a very interesting background, and how did it work for you? When did you get hooked onto wildlife, and which way did you get hooked?
Right. So yeah, Gopaji, I ask myself this question a lot of times, that when did it actually start? Because, as far as I can trace, long back in childhood, I was always very, passionate about wildlife. And probably one of the factors which I feel contributed greatly to this is my home in Kanpur was very close to the zoo. And it's so close that, in the evenings, I could hear the roars of the lions or the tigers, and that was sort of a very different experience, in childhood, when you hear these things right next to you, you sort of imagine what world would they be living in the wild or in jungles.
That's right.
And that sort of attracted me as a child. Then, of course, studies, academics, it sort of, I sort of, went in the background. I couldn't really give so much time to it. Then college days, when I began, clicking, I realized, okay, maybe I want to try something more, go into wildlife, nature reserves or sanctuaries, and then get to know wildlife more. So I studied a little bit about them. I started clicking. And then I guess the peak actually came with the job, as just like with you, that, when I started working is when I actually realized that this is something which I want to do in all of my free time. So whenever, on weekends or whenever early mornings I have to, before work, I would go to a sanctuary or go to a wetland and spend some time there, studying and understanding these beautiful creatures of all kinds. And then trying to, photograph, of course. And I guess that's where the, journey began. It's still ongoing. So that's what I would.
And how did you learn photography itself, the art and science of photography?
Right. This is very important actually, Gopaji. Mostly I would say I'm self-taught. I mean, I didn't really do many courses or anything, and I recommend this to a lot of people who ask me that how do you become a photographer? How do you? I think for any person, any passion or hobby which you want to pursue, I say there's a rule. I don't know where I've read it, but it says that nearly 10,000 hours of your life, if you give to some particular hobby or some particular interest of yours, you will master it, you will become good at it. So I guess it's just a matter of time. You need to give time to it, your devotion to it, and ultimately you land up understanding that where your techniques are right, what would you want to portray in your photography, and then of course you can do value addition by understanding other photographers, and maybe doing some courses over the while. So I guess the inspiration should be within somebody, that I want to do this, and then you go ahead and
Wow. So two things you're saying that I'm really struck by. One is that you're saying, just for my understanding, you're saying 10,000 hours of commitment.
Right.
I'm just assuming I'm now going to apply a little mathematics. I'm saying every week.
Yeah.
Every week, if you give about 20 hours,
right,
that means in a year, 50 weeks approximately, you give about 1,000 hours.
Right.
So in about 10 years, you
absolutely.
can really reach the level of being a master, a skilled master.
Absolutely.
Right?
Wow. And thank you so much for very succinctly mathematically expressing it, because I'm sure that everybody would appreciate that. In terms of hours, in terms of years, maybe anything between 7 to 10 years is the kind of time you need to give.
So one interesting thing, I mean, if I may ask you, just following on this, a lot of the time that you spend with your camera, you're actually waiting, am I right? You're just waiting for something to happen.
Oh, yes. That's something, that's a very interesting observation. That's very true, actually. A lot of times, in fact, let's say it's a 3-hour session in a sanctuary, and I'm waiting for a particular bird or a particular animal to come. Then you land up sitting at a spot and waiting. And it may come, it may not come, something else might turn up. It's entirely, of course, the mood of nature and how they land up surprising you or disappointing you, either ways. So
right.
but in my experience, I've always found that if you go without any expectation, like a lot of people, when they go to a safari, the expectation is to see a tiger,
right.
or to see an elephant, or to they have a fixed agenda that I need to see this, and that's when I'll call my safari successful. But my point and my suggestion to all of people who are watching this is, ensure that you don't have any agenda. You go just for the the sake of it. You just need to be there to understand what's happening around, and trust me, you'll never be disappointed. Whatever you see will be, as long as you keep your ears and eyes open, you would see something which is probably never expected, so that way you're never disappointed, really.
Right. So I want to bring in an observation with your permission, Raghav.
Please.
So and this is, we've got 145 people on the call.
Right.
And my favorite cricketer, and I'm sure the favorite cricketer of many people on this group was Rahul Dravid.
Right.
And the journalist Rohit Brijnath has written a piece in the Mint about Dravid's style of cricket. I don't know, Raghav, are you a fan of Rahul Dravid as well? Are you a cricket fan?
Not really, but I do appreciate. I mean, I'm sure
Okay.
I'll appreciate. Yeah.
So there's something interesting that you and I can learn from this, which is Rohit Brijnath, who's a wonderful journalist. He wrote about Dravid's style of batting, and he said the beauty of Dravid's style of batting is he was just waiting. So he said a big part of Dravid's batting is the wait.
Right.
You don't see Dravid hit strokes the way, for example, many other cricketers used to hit. He would just wait. His job was to wait.
Correct.
Right? And in that sense, when I read that piece on Dravid, I was thinking, wow, this is what wildlife photographers do all the time. They're waiting.
Yes.
And it is a skill. It is just, I'm a very bad photographer. And that's why I admire people like Raghav. I have lots of friends like Raghav, Ramki Srinivasan, Kalyan Verma, Raghav. These are wonderful, wonderful photographers. And the thing that's common to all of them is, just to let all of you know, is these are people who are very comfortable doing nothing but waiting. And many others will get itchy and take out their mobile phones and want to surf. But these are guys who sit with their camera and do nothing for hours on end. You know, Rana and Sugandhi, my dear friends. So lots of photographers have this lovely skill of being just very comfortable with themselves, right? And in studying otters, particularly the very elusive small clawed or the short clawed otter, is the same story. You've got to sit along the stream or the higher reaches of the river and just wait. And after waiting for 3-4 hours, you will see nothing, maybe very often, 90% of the time, nothing that you want to see. You may see a lot of other things that you haven't come to see, like Raghav said. Wonderful, wonderful, Raghav. This is so good to hear and see. And
so one last question I want to ask, regarding otters, that like a lot of people, I'm sure, like people who are watching, if he took a survey, I'm pretty sure many of them wouldn't know about this creature, what the otter is. And as you mentioned that, the charismatic species, the megafauna, normally the hype about it is so much that these lesser mortals get ignored. So, what is the, let's say, one thing about otters which sort of attracted you and, which pushed you in this direction, that like, this is something, or these are the species I want to, work on and help conservation in? What is that one thing?
Right. So can I make that two things, if you
Absolutely.
Don't mind?
Sure.
Not one thing. So the first thing that got me to love the animal was the sheer vitality and joy of the animal, the life in the animal as a group. Just as a little bit of general knowledge, a group of otters is called a romp, ROMP. This is for everybody. The romp of otters, the sheer life and vitality of a group is just brilliant to watch. That's one. The second thing, Raghav, is at the time we started working on otters, and probably even today, we realized that there are a lot of threats to these species outside protected areas. And for various reasons, the authorities, the forest department, the fisheries department find themselves in difficult positions. I'm very empathetic to the challenges they face. They have very serious challenges, especially when a river or a stream goes outside a protected area. So we realized that if we want to do something, it doesn't have to be in a protected area. It doesn't have to be in Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary, because there the forest department gives very competent protection to the species. It has to be outside the protected areas. Right? And this combination of two things, the beauty and joy of the animal and the realization that it was, like you said, most people didn't even know there are, it's outside the sort of common framework of understanding, and it is in danger. And I can, when I make my brief presentation after you, I will talk very briefly about that. So that these two factors is the answer to your question. And it would be really nice for you to actually tell us a little more. I mean, do a little presentation on your work for the next 10 minutes or so. That'll be so nice.
Thank you so much. Yes, Cauver. Yeah. So Prabhakarji, could you please move on to the next slide, maybe? Yeah, so we've done this, and yeah. So basically, before we begin, conservation photography, I would just like to give a very short introduction of what these types of wildlife photographies are. And Prabhakar, you can, in fact, click, so that I can, tell the entire list. So you have night photography, which is, photographing in the night. Then you have macro for small creatures, backlit when the light is behind your subject. Underwater is self-explanatory. Conservation photography, which is highlighting a particular species and the destruction of its habitat, etc., how to preserve it. Experimental photography is something which is non-conventional. Landscape and portrait are frame-based. So these are broadly the types of wildlife photography which one can, go in for, and people are looking to, go into this photography may sort of choose a specialization, so to say. There's no hard and fast rule. You may do a bit of all of it. But today we'll be particularly speaking about conservation photography, because that is highly relevant. Next slide, please. So the scope and importance of conservation photography, and we, as photographers, have this responsibility. I feel that when we are doing this, going into forests or wetlands or mountains or snow, deserts, the habitats are varied. You can land up going to so many places. Can be even urban wildlife photography as well. So what is the whole point of photographs? What do you do with these? So this is what we'll discuss about. Through conservation photography, we are trying to send a message across society to all the stakeholders of the importance of conserving species, habitats, biodiversity, all these various components of ecosystems. So we'll look at some of photographs and then we'll talk about it and what is the basic importance of this conservation photography. The first is highlighting the species which are about to be extinct, like this bird, which is the great Indian bustard. There's just about 100, 200 of these left in India. And probably, I don't want to, sound so negative or pessimistic, but this would probably be the first species to go extinct in independent India, the one which we know of. So this is the situation, and when you sort of highlight these importances, then you realize that this is a very normal drab looking bird. It's probably like an ostrich, not too many colors, very unassuming. But once you are there and you see it walking through the desert like a sentinel, you get inspired. You feel that, okay, I need to share the story with people and, to ensure that this species doesn't go extinct. And we can do a lot of work. So the ERDS Foundation, which I was, mentioned in my introduction, does this. We are trying to get the feral dogs out of the common areas. As Gopaji said, that the challenge with this bird is also the same, that a lot of birds are actually outside the desert sanctuary, the desert wildlife sanctuary. So that means that, a lot of conservation has to be done outside this. Next. So beside extinction, the other scope or importance of the conservation photography is, next slide, please. Prabhakar ji, next slide, please. Yeah. is wildlife in crisis. And this is a photograph of vultures. This was taken again in Rajasthan near Jaisalmer. And a lot of you might appreciate that vultures, the population of vultures has declined. It is almost gone from millions to hundreds and thousands. And the issue with this is that vultures, which used to be numerous earlier, have been reduced to hundreds. And now what the problem is that we'll see that vultures were very effective in reducing waste, or especially of carcasses of dead bodies, etc. And what happened was that because of this drug which was given to cattle, which is called diclofenac, these vultures started dying. Thankfully, that drug was banned, and now they are jumping back to good numbers. But now, what the importance is because of this, feral dogs have taken their place, as scavengers. And they have plenty of food now to dispose. But the problem is that they are not effective scavengers like vultures. So what happens is the body remains rotting, and it gives a lot of scope for microorganisms to fester, develop, and these then become pandemics like avian flu or swine flu, what have you. So this is an example to show how vultures are directly linked with us. And sooner or later, when you have caused a negative impact on environment or biodiversity, it will come back and affect us. Next, please. This is an example of an endemic species. This is the crimson-backed sunbird. It was taken in Dandeli, Karnataka. And again, this is an example to highlight how endemic species are those which are, found in a particular geographical area only. So this particular bird is only found in the Western Ghats of India and nowhere else in the entire world, in fact. So this highlights how crucial, saving its habitat is, because once gone, this bird is gone forever, So this becomes importance of endemism. Next, please.
Can I, Raghav,
Yes,
can I make a quick point?
Yes, Cauvery.
So I just want to add that this is such a beautiful photograph, and I want to compliment you for it.
Thank you so much.
And just to sort of, since you're saying it's highly endemic to an area,
right.
One interesting facet that occurs to me right away is if local people see a photograph like this, of a species that is so small, of a bird that is so small that otherwise they would never notice.
Absolutely, agree.
So beauty and just the bird or the animal's texture, color, etc. The way it is itself is such a strong conservation tool, isn't it? Just to show this to people and say this is in your backyard,
very true.
And this is really rare. And do you realize that this bird is something special for you? Just a question.
Yeah. That's very valid point.
Okay.
Sorry, I think the speaker is on by mistake.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a very valid point. If the local population or the local community becomes aware of such wildlife, which is so rare, endangered, endemic, then they will take pride in it. And that pride is, that's how it can help in conservation.
Yes.
Next, please. This is an example again of, risks, how we can highlight risks of which a particular species is facing through conservation photography. This is in Navi Mumbai, and these are lesser flamingos. And right in the background, you can see a lot of industrial and structural activities happening. So the risk is here that if in case this wetland starts to get effluents or pollutants, then would these species continue, visiting this place, continue thriving here? So with the help of this photograph, we can actually, make people aware, especially the industries or the government, to how to make sure that the industries can keep on, functioning, but at least ensure that there's a, fine line of distinction between where this habitat is and where the industry is. Next, please.
Right. And again, sorry, Raghav, I'm very tempted. Your photographs are really beautiful. I'm very tempted to point out that, for many of us, as you're a hobbyist but serious photographer, photographs like this have inspired even people in the political establishment.
Absolutely.
And these are people who can take critical decisions on conservation.
Very true.
And many, in this group will know that in the last few months, the Maharashtra government has taken a number of proactive steps. And clearly there is a strong interest in conservation and conservation centricity. And I'm sure it is no surprise that the Chief Minister of Maharashtra is also a wildlife photographer.
Yes.
And therefore, there is a very strong kind of, because he's a very strong hobbyist photographer.
Yeah.
There has been back to you. Sorry if I'm
no, absolutely. Like this is amazing. It's very true that, how these photographs can have persuasive value. As you said, that, if we are lucky to have politicians who actually have a background in wildlife photography, even if they don't, but at least this photograph can at least communicate, the kind of problems which the particular species is facing. So I absolutely, it's fantastic. It's very important.
That's right. Sorry, please continue.
No, please. Then the next point which we can highlight through conservation photography is malpractices. And this is a photograph from Mumbai. You can see the Marine Drive, in the background, and these are brown-headed gulls. You can see in the left side of the photograph, there's a feeding happening. There's a person feeding these birds. Now, how do we highlight what is wrong about this photo? Prima facie, it's just a bird. It's just feeding, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong. But it's wrong on two counts. One, that the food which we offer is not typically meant for these birds. It's oily or sugary or spicy, and it's not meant for their systems. And the other thing, which is more subtle, is that many of these birds are juveniles. And once they get dependent on humans for this food, then they land up, eroding their instinct to hunt. And that actually causes an entire population to collapse. So this is something which happens at a very subtle level. We don't even realize. We are just, in the morning, we just give some snacks and move away. What's happening is that little by little, many of these birds are getting so accustomed to humans that they'll, come there, they'll feed, and then they'll be happy for the rest of the day without even ever having to hunt. Now, this is their natural instinct to hunt is eroded. And that is a serious malpractice. So this is one, as I like quoting this photograph as kindness kills. So here, kindness is actually killing. So we have to be aware of, where we draw a line. Next, please. Then next, of course, we have biodiversity. That's, of course, through your conservation photographs, you can highlight the interaction of these beautiful birds. This is the Malabar grey hornbill, again from Karnataka. And you can see how peacefully it's having an amazing time, surrounded by figs on all sides. And this is an excellent example to show how birds or how animals are so comfortable in their habitats. And we need to highlight that, that particular habitat needs to be preserved, including all its components, the abiotic ones like, rocks and rivers and mountains, to the biotic ones like birds and trees. So this is an example of biodiversity. Next, please. Then, of course, you have threats. Like this Eurasian curlew. Now, this is a globally endangered migratory species, and it comes from hundreds of miles away. And winters in India, stays here, has food, and then travels back. So what has happened here in the background, you can see there's a lot of human activity, a lot of human waste, pollutants. Typically, this beach is normally very clean, but then the day I was there, there was a stench coming from human waste around. So that's when I realized that how important it is to highlight that these particular species are facing these threats on a regular basis. All we need to do is, maybe, earmark some areas which do not have any human interaction, or maybe reduced human interaction. And that way we can ensure that these species are treated well, they are our guests, and, they feed here, and then they can go back to their homes.
So what species is that again, Raghav?
Yeah, that was the Eurasian curlew. It's named because of the curled, the long bill it has, a very long bill, probably one of the longest bill to body ratios in any bird. And this is normally found in wetlands, and it feeds by preening into the sandy beaches around, mollusks and worms and the like.
Wow. And it's a miracle of evolution again.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other interesting thing is that most of these water birds, if somebody notices with patience, all of them have very different bills, the beaks. Each bill has a particular, shape, and accordingly it goes to a particular depth. And interestingly, each depth of the beaches will have different kind of wildlife. Right. So that way there's no competition. A curlew will have no competition with, let's say, a sandpiper, and a sandpiper will have no competition with, let's say, a ruddy turnstone. So all these birds are having their own specialized diets, and none of them have competition amongst themselves. So this is how beautiful this is co-evolution. How they have evolved separately yet together and living in harmony. So we need to respect that and ensure that they continue doing so.
Right.
Next, please. Behavior. So that's another example of how conservation photography can highlight how these creatures behave amongst themselves with the different species, with their habitat. So here we can see on the bottom right corner there's a little duck. It's called the whistling duck, and there are on the right next to it there are a lot of small chicks, and this bird is screaming at the two on the left side. It's trying to protect its children, and the children are looking very expectantly at their moms, saying that, "Mom, save us! We don't like these people." So this is how you can show that how wildlife behaves in so many ways similar to us, and that again brings out the element of how emotions are central to wildlife as well. So conservation photography actually brings to fore these issues as well.
Right.
Next, please.
That's the purple moorhen on the left.
Yes, the purple moorhen. Absolutely right. Next, then the broader issue that how conservation photography can actually show what the habitat is and how it needs protection. So this is from Nandur Madhumeshwar, which is a Ramsar wetland very recently declared in Maharashtra. And on the bottom left you see a jackal, the golden jackal, which is approaching the purple heron, which is on the right. And you can see the purple heron has a long stretched out neck, very warily looking at the jackal, knowing that it's in for trouble. And of course, in the next few moments, it flew away as well. But the idea is how important the habitat is. You can see the tree behind. You can see a lot of wetland bushes around. You can see reeds there. You can see the river itself. This way, it explains that how a photograph can actually communicate the entire ecosystem in one small frame. So that is very important. How we get to understand that these are the various components which need to be saved. So the habitat is part of the conservation program.
So may I add this is so evocative, and I'm just adding a point here, which is your bit on wetlands. Wetlands are so much in danger in India from every possible source. And often they are considered to be wastelands. They are considered to be, the places where effluents are dumped, etc. But you and I and many others who are part of this conversation today know that they are very precious wildlife refuges.
Absolutely.
And they also are so important for our water security. So it's really by protecting these species and the wetlands, we are really being very selfish and protecting ourselves.
Actually, very true. That's very true. If we save these habitats, we're actually having the water issues anyway. We are having so many dark zones in the country where the water levels have dropped precipitously. And if we are not saving these wetlands, very true that we are actually endangering ourselves more than wildlife. We're probably endangering ourselves. So
lovely.
Very true. Then of course you can have the micro world. This world is very hidden from view because typically these there are insects, there are microorganisms, there are microfauna, microflora. You have a dragonfly here, which is called the common flutterer or the variegated flutterer, and the micro world can also be shown through conservation photography. You can see how it has a stained glass rendering to its wings, and the colors are come up so well. So this is an example to show how macro or micro photography actually this is the only place where macro and micro means the same. Micro photography and macro photography are actually the same. it's pretty surprising how, but then this is how it is, and this can be an example of how you can highlight small creatures which can actually show a lot of difference because of climate change or environmental change around them. even the smallest of creatures. Next, please. Then, of course, you have migration, which is a huge issue. We don't have, let's say, the Serengeti here in India. We don't have such a large scale of migration on land, but we do have these amazing migrations in the air when you have these birds coming. And these are Amur falcons. There are about 2 lakhs of them, and this was taken in Nagaland, Doyang. And every year they are passage migrants. So what they do is they stop over at India in Nagaland, have a gala time feeding on insects, and then they proceed. Yeah, and then they proceed towards South Africa. So here they are, and in the next slide will actually show you how they actually look like up close. Yeah. So this is the Amur. The one which is flying is the male, and the one which is shying away is the female. So this is an example of how migration can be highlighted through conservation photography. You can actually talk about Doyang, the dam, which and in fact it actually helped. Well, this is a very interesting story behind it, that these birds used to be hunted down in hundreds, thousands in Nagaland, and they used to be sold as meat in the open market. And because of photography, because people started going there, and the guides, obviously they knew these spots where where you could see these birds, they were actually convinced that you will actually earn higher by being an ecotourist guide or a birding guide than by being a person who sells meat. And then we landed up actually saving these birds. Every year now we have millions of them flocking, and thankfully that situation is under control. So this is something positive from conservation, how photographs or how tourists, even ecotourists especially, can actually help save the environment.
That's right.
Yeah. Next, please. And then, of course, you have uniqueness. And this is a video. Prabhakar, you can just click again, so the video will start. And I think the video will speak for itself. This is an example of how unique a particular species can be. There you go. So I think the video, you could have seen that little bird jumping up and then coming down. And that is a lesser florican. Next slide, please. Yeah, after maybe you can do the video again if you want. Yeah. There.
Wow.
Yeah. So this bird is very unique. It has this mating ritual of jumping up and down during the monsoons about 100 to 200 times a day without getting tired. It's pure joy. Just like otters, you when you see this bird or a species, you just know that it's full of energy, full of joy. And so the next slide will actually show you how it actually looks like, the lesser florican. And this is an example to show how these birds can, little less, they are about, 1800, 2200 left, again, very little numbers, and how these birds can actually be highlighted in the public forum and people know more about them. Next, please. And of course, you have endangered species. This is the Dalmatian pelican. This is from Nalsarovar, Gujarat. And again, conservation photography, as we saw earlier also, particular to endangered species, we can highlight how the behavior is, which habitats they're inhabiting, and how the local community can help save these birds or other species. Next, please. And of course, you have interaction, how wildlife can interact with you. This is the golden jackal, and this is again Nandar Madhumeshwar. And here it is looking bang into the camera, unafraid, and in fact, very close to us. So this can actually show how, creatures can interact with humans, or humans interact with creatures, how they interact among themselves. So this is an example of how they can learn to coexist. Jackals are actually known to coexist with humans in a variety of areas. They're quite unafraid, and they cause minimal damage, to be fair. And that's an example to show how species can coexist as long as patient.
In fact, a quick comment. I mean,
Yes.
in many parts of India,
Yeah.
Farmers are having a real problem of crop destruction from wild pigs.
Wild pigs.
And one primary reason is that jackals have been hunted or
absolutely
removed.
Very true.
And jackals used to predate, or the jackals actually predate on piglets. And in the absence of jackals, the piglet populations and therefore the wild pig populations have exploded.
Very true. Yes. So very good, excellent example. This is how we can learn from these, various examples. And the last, use or scope of conservation photography is to highlight emotion. And you can see this is pure love. Those chicks hugging probably their dad, because it's a bronze-winged jacana. So the bronze-winged jacana is typically the male raises the young ones, and you can see how they're hugging their father, probably trying to get in under their wings and feel protected. So this is an example to show emotions which can be highlighted through wildlife conservation program. So I guess that was a long presentation on photography, and over to you, Gopaji, without wasting more time, on how wildlife conservation can, what work you've done there, especially in otters. Would love to hear from you.
But this is a lovely, lovely presentation. I must tell you, I'm very indebted to you. I think your photography is beautiful, and the comments that follow from each photograph are so evocative.
Thank you so much.
And I, for one, have, in the last 20 minutes, I think I've learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right.
Over to you.
Yes, yes. And for everyone, what I would like to bring up is one very interesting common point between Raghav's work and my work. Right in the beginning of Raghav's presentation, Raghav, you mentioned feral dogs.
Right.
And you probably already know that feral dogs are a big threat to otters as well.
Oh.
And they tend to chase otters, and because otters are not very good on land. In fact, they're pretty bad on land. Dogs, especially when they isolate an otter, can cause grievous damage to the species, right? Right away, I would like to tell everyone that many people see wildlife conservation as a very glamorous kind of occupation. It isn't. It is actually the opposite of that.
Yeah.
It is often very boring, very lonely, a lot of disappointment, sometimes working on issues that are probably very prosaic, very mundane, very common. Like, as a classic example, how do you stop hunting? How do you stop feral dog or stray dog movement into wildlife areas? Because they are very big threats today to wildlife, right? So issues like that are real conservation, and they are difficult conservation issues, and they are actually the crucial issues, right? So Prabhakar, thank you, Prabhakar. So otters, I mentioned about half an hour ago that otters are something that got me hugely excited. This is an animal called the smooth-coated otter. And many of you, if you're fortunate enough to have seen this or photographed it, you will know just how pretty and how beautiful they are. They are typically found in some of the main river ecosystems in India, particularly in some of the South Indian ecosystems. And they are the apex predators of the river along with the crocs. And we will come to that in a few minutes' time. Yes, Prabhakar, let's move on. So my first sighting of the otter, the smooth-coated Raghav, was in the Cauvery river. This wasn't, actually, I'm a bad photographer. This was taken by my dear friend Anjali Anantharamu. And
I'm having goosebumps because it's the first time I'm seeing otters up close. And it's my dream, and I would like to place on record that in case he detracts, Gopaji has invited me to to visit these otters, and I'm really looking forward to.
Right.
Yeah, amazing.
So if all of you pay attention to the otter that's in the river, you will notice the back is in the shape of a hump, and this is very characteristic of the species called mustelids. And the otters there are 3 species found in India. There is this, what you see is the smooth-coated otter, which typically inhabits the lower reaches or the mid reaches and the lower reaches of a river.
Right.
Often found in wetlands, adjoining river ecosystems, found in mangrove forests, as well as in the mainstream channels of rivers. Right now we are in the middle of the monsoon, and you will not see otters in the main river ecosystems because of the current.
Okay.
So during these seasons, typically otters tend to find their way up little channels, little canals, irrigation canals, probably the less powerful flows of tributaries, rather than exist in the main river where the current flows could be very strong.
Right.
But for most parts of the non-monsoon seasons, they are found in the mainstream of the rivers itself, right? The small-clawed otter, also called the short-clawed otter, is found across parts of Asia, and that's the smallest of the 13 species in the world. Prabhakar, if you can just show me 2 more photos, just go click, and 1 more.
This is the small clawed.
The last, I beg your pardon?
This is the small clawed otter.
Yeah, the last one you see here, this is the small clawed otter, but it's a camera trap image and therefore not very clear. The first two are from our camera trap. So we've been working along 3 riparian landscapes in Karnataka and 1 outside, documenting. 7 years ago, we began the process of documenting A, are there otters in the river? B, can we figure out how many otters there are? What's the kind of numbers, right? And C, are there any threats to these species? And it took us a couple of years, not me so much, but 2 of my colleagues who actually rafted down the river in patches over various number of months. And the answers they got were, yes, there are otters in the river, right? They are found in sporadic places inside the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary for sure, in good numbers, but outside as well. We just can't get a handle on how many they are, but we have some approximation in certain stretches. And C, there are some very real threats. And those threats are threats which actually Raghav has brought out very well. I mean, they are variations of those threats, not exactly, those were variations, right? The point I want to emphasize, Raghav, and to everybody on this call is, these are threats that involve people. And therefore, anybody can be a conservationist. You don't have to have a PhD in wildlife biology. You have to be a PhD in wildlife biology if you're researching an animal in understanding certain aspects of that animal. So like, for example, feed, dietary habits, abundance, occupancy, details, though there is a lot of merit in that research has its own value. That research has to lead to understanding if this animal needs some form of protection. There are 2 kinds of protection. There is protection that the government offers through the creation of protected areas. There's protection that people give, and India has a fantastic tradition of protection. We have sacred groves. We have species like, the Bishnoi community in Rajasthan protects so many species, including the black buck. And we have read stories about communities across India, and Raghav probably has even documented some of them, Raghav, where the communities are involved in protection. Gopi Sundar has spoken so evocatively about how so many species that he works with, and I'll come back to that. The Sarus crane is what he's primarily talked about, gets protection from villagers. Right? Now, so there are 2 kinds of protection: government sponsored in some sense and people sponsored. And we are really looking at the people sponsored type. And we don't have to be, I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I believe in the need for very robust science. And camera traps are a way of getting robust science. They are not the only methodology, but for a species that spends now, to tell everyone, this species, particularly the smooth-coated otter, spends most of its time in the water. It is a very fast swimmer. You spend 4 hours trying to track a single group or romp of smooth-coated otters. You probably see it for a few minutes when it comes out on sandbanks. Sand is very important for it. They play on sand. They defecate on sand. They socialize on sand. It is a very important bonding place for it. So sand mining, for example, is a big threat to smooth-coated otter populations. They just exit the area. There's nothing for them left when there is sand mining happening in a particular stretch, right? So we've been working with both these species, particularly smooth-coateds. The small clod, which you see in the bottom of the photograph on the right, it's a nocturnal species and therefore very tough to work with. Right. The smooth-coated is partly diurnal, which means it's active very early in the morning and then goes on to probably about 10, 11, and then again is active in the afternoon time, closer to dusk, right? Now, these species, can we move on, Prabhakar? These species have a very critical role to play in river and stream ecosystems, right?
It's amazing. It shows the habitat so well. It's amazing.
So one quick caveat, this is not my photograph. None of these are my photograph. I am such a bad photographer. You should be ashamed to be in the same conversation.
No, not at all. I'm so proud. I'm learning about otters, and your work is amazing. It's so nice to hear this. Amazing.
So this is a beautiful photograph taken by a friend of mine inside the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary. And I want everybody to focus on the tree in the center. This is the Terminalia Arjuna. It's also called the Arjun. It's a sacred tree. It's a medicinal tree. And it is the flagship tree of the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary and of the Cauvery ecosystem in its mid-course, right? The otter loves denning or making dens in the roots of this tree. And this tree affords it protection, for example, for its pups from predation, from snakes, from animals like, interestingly, the jackal, or that occasionally predates otter pups, etc. Right? Now, why is protecting the otter important? That's the question I want to spend 2 minutes on. The otter, along with the croc, is an apex predator. What we mean by an apex predator is, on terrestrial ecosystems, we all know that the tiger has a role to play as an apex predator. And we all know that Project Tiger came up in the early 70s, around 73. And if Project Tiger had not been there, today's India's forests would have been a fraction of what they are today, certainly in size. In terms of quality, India's forest can be a lot better. But in terms of size, Project Tiger has done wonders. We may have a lot of issues with it, but it's still done wonders for just sheer protected area that the tiger has brought about, and therefore contributes to the oxygen that Raghav breathes and I breathe and all of us breathe. Right? Similarly, the otter is an apex predator of the riparian ecosystem or the river ecosystem. The reason is simple. If the water is polluted, the otter will not be there. It occasionally finds its way into polluted rivers, but that is not its habitat. Right? If we protect the river otter, the way to protect it is, and I will talk about the science in just the next slide in a minute, where the otter is not present, but what present earlier. In other words, where the indication is that there are otters, there aren't otters now, but there were otters earlier, you know something has happened. Let me give you an example, Raghav. The little town of Chiplun in Maharashtra, which you are very familiar with.
Right.
The town of Chiplun is on the banks of a sacred river called Vashishti. And just downstream of Vashishti, there is an industrial estate which is called the MIDC Industrial Estate. Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation Industrial Estate. It's been there for some 15, 20 years. And a couple of factories in that industrial estate discharge their effluents into the Vashishti River. This area, this river was a very vibrant ecosystem for fishermen, excellent fish diversity, and for otters. The otters used to catch some fish from the fishermen's nets or their hooks, but it was live and let live. Once the pollution began, the otters died. The otters exited the area. We don't know what has happened. The current research that we did last was in 2015, which showed that there are hardly any otters left. There were about 3 otters that we recorded over our entire survey, which is a very, very poor. 3 otters is not even one single romp, right? But here's the interesting part. The fishermen have also exited the system because there are no fish.
There's no fish.
And if you look at it, hundreds and hundreds of fishermen whose livelihoods were dependent, and their families, their livelihoods were dependent on this ecosystem, are not there anymore. They are, guess what? They are ecosystem refugees. They are people who are now manual labor in Pune or manual labor in Bombay City, Mumbai City, manual labor, they are probably our construction labor today, right? And my argument is, if you protect the otter, you cannot do that without protecting the habitat that everybody knows. And as a photographer, Raghav knows that even better than all of us. I need to protect the habitat, right? Unless I protect the habitat, I can't protect the species. And in protecting the habitat, it is very selfish. I am protecting myself. I'm protecting livelihoods in this country. They are totally interrelated. For me, the joy of working on otters is I am not working on a species. I'm working on a species and being selfish about humanity as well. Right? This is, and Prabhakar, can we move on? I'll talk about the science here. Am I taking too long, Raghav?
No, of course not. Bobaji, perfect. It's amazing. We need to know this. This is the high point of the discussion. Everything. Okay. Please spend some time on this. This is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, if you look at fish, for example, I just want to tell everybody on this call, some of the British, when India was, prior to 1947, when India was ruled essentially by the Brits, one of the things about the Brits were they loved fishing. And the Cauvery was an area they loved to go fishing. Even today in the United Kingdom, fishing is a national sport, right? Now, one study has actually documented, this is prior to independence, has documented 122 species of fish in the Cauvery River. And so as all of you know, whatever you document is only a fraction of what is actually there, right? It is like when you go in, I mean, think about fish. You know, you go into, supposing I say I want to study insects and I go into a little patch of grass and I say I have documented 35 insects. The chances are there will be 3,500 insects, but I have documented only 35.
Absolutely. Right.
Similarly, if you have documented 122 species of fish, you can imagine how many species were there, right? In 2014, my colleague who documented species documented 21 species.
My gosh.
Right? And the area that he documented across was approximately 140 kilometers. These 122 species about, prior to independence was documented over just about 30-35 kilometers. What I'm trying to tell you is, unless we study prey diversity, and this Dr. Ullas Karant in his study on prey abundance, with Dr. Karant in his study on tigers brought out so beautifully, unless I study prey, I cannot study predator. They go together, right? Number one. Number two, we all know that dams have had a problem. And dams don't, by the way, dams don't affect otters too much, actually. Unlike what people normally say, the otter per se, the species per se is not affected.
Right.
But what gets affected is their favorite prey.
Prey. Oh.
Because many species, again, just for everyone's information, many species of fish actually migrate upstream to lay their eggs in sand. And this is a process we all call, which is called spawning. And the mahshir, which is the most beautiful and charismatic, is called the tiger of the river. It is the species of the river, the highest, the biggest mahshir caught in the Cauvery, which was weighed, was, I think, a little over 56 kilos.
Oh my.
Right? Yeah. And this go upstream to lay eggs in sand. And once you create a dam there, you're creating a wall and saying, I don't want you to come anywhere beyond it. Right? The second issue of prey diversity is that exotic species like African catfish have come in, and otters don't like African catfish. Right? Otters don't prefer, they do eat, but they actually have a real issue with many exotic species that have come in, including species of tilapia, or which is called the common carp. Right? Now, just to, because I'm a teacher, Raghav, sometimes I get into this lecture mode. So you have to tell me, Gopa, bahut ho gaya? Now, can you? Yeah. So the next issue, as Prabhakar has brought up beautifully below, is sand. Every one of us probably knows there's a problem with sand mining, right? But sand is actually the soil of the river. We have done films while working on otters. We have done films, and I very recently wrote in The Wire about the importance of sand. You remove sand from an ecosystem, a river ecosystem, and that is the beginning of the collapse of the riparian ecosystem. In Kerala, Raghav, there is a river which is called the Neela River. It's a beautiful river, it goes past the town of Ottapalam, right? And the Neela River got its sand removed. It was one of the first ecosystems in this country where the sand was fully mined out. And friends of mine have documented the complete ecosystem collapse that has resulted from the mining out of sand. Right? All your, if you look at mollusks, as you pointed out, right? If you look at eggs of fish, if you look at otters, they just exit the area. They're not there anymore. So we need science. We need robust science to understand prey-predator relationship, prey diversity, prey abundance, predator abundance. We need to look at statistics. We work extensively on trying to understand what is the quantification of pollution in the river from both agriculture and sewage. Right? The NGT, in fact, on the National Green Tribunal has a landmark judgment, which has said that from April this year, and the corona issue came in between, but really from April this year, no sewage has to be released into India's rivers. I don't know if you knew this.
Oh, wow, no, this is amazing. Excellent.
This is a path-breaking judgment from the National Green Tribunal. And it's available online. The entire judgment is available on time from 31st. And if there is any sewage, there is appropriate fines and so on. Now, bottom line is, that is very important for me. If I'm working on otters, I need to understand about sewage and what the NGT rulings on sewage are. I cannot say I'm a scientist. Because first of all, I'm not a scientist, but I cannot say that. Right? Okay, so let's move on to the last slide. I think that is the last. So that's it. That's about it, right? I think that was it. So Thank you very much. And Raghav, that I took longer than I thought, but thank you.
Gopaji, I think all of us, I'm sure the audience will agree that probably it's one of the most enriching, talks which I had, especially on a species which is so unknown. It's relatively unknown, and within a span of 10-15 minutes now we know about the species, of how the relationship between the habitat, the prey, the predator, and the currently what challenges that's being faced. So I think that's amazing. And thank you so much, Gopaji, that everybody's
Welcome. My pleasure.
benefiting a lot from this, and I'm sure that you will get a call of a youngster saying that I want to join the conservation, and that's what the the victory of it is. It's amazing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I will now come in.
Yeah.
We are already slow. And there are a couple of people who have sent questions and two people who have raised their hand.
Right.
We will take maybe 3 or 4 questions.
Yes.
And can I request you all to keep the responses relatively short?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yes.
Because for the next part of it, we will be running late otherwise.
Yes.
Dr. Basuraj had raised his hand some time ago. Sir, can you please come over? Dr. Basuraja? Maybe he's not there, I think. Dr. Paramesha had a question.
Yeah, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you. Dr. Paramesha, please continue.
Yeah, sir, this question for both of you is a general question. So I'm a Dr. Paramesha. I'm in the conservation field from past 15 years. I was with A3. Then last 2 years, I moved to St. Joseph's College as an assistant professor. So just like me, many hardcore conservationist opinion is that wildlife conservation is becoming fashion, not a passion. Question number 1. And people with big cameras and camouflage dress, they declare themselves as a wildlife conservationist. Many IT, VT people, they're following these kinds of things nowadays. And it's a kind of another opinion. It's a kind of rich people's profession, but actual conservationists are local people. So, and another thing, getting permission to work in the forest is a really big challenge nowadays for an actual normal person, unless you are an influenced person or anything else. So, because when I'm motivating my students to come to ecology field to research, they are raising these kinds of things. Okay, so they observed, they listened, they heard. So many things. What is your opinion on this, sir?
Right.
Raghav?
Yeah, so I will take up the photography part. Dr. Parmesha, I think it's a very relevant point that you're making, that people take it up as fashion more than passion. It's become more like a sort of one way to sort of tell that okay, you're into this and conservation without actually not doing anything. In fact, later we'll be speaking about photography ethics. Probably after the interactive session, which is where I'll highlight what are the kind of issues which people need to take ensure that photographers are taking into account while going into the wild, and those are things if people are not following, then they're not really conservationists. And so wildlife photography as a hobby, or as a career, or as something which you're into, must ensure that you will be an ethical, you're following certain codes. It's a moral code which is very important. If you're not following that, then you're not. So I think that's one thing. And the other part, forest part, I think the other thing is that most of the conservation actually is happening outside the forest, as Gopaji also said. So I think I don't really find that to be much of a problem. I don't know. Gopaji, would you recommend?
Yeah, so just a request, Dr. Parmesha, if you could please mute your microphone. There's some.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll quickly answer this by saying the biggest need for conservation and research is outside the forest department's purview.
Right.
That is where the maximum complications are, that is where the maximum threats are, and that is where the maximum interactions are.
Right.
And we need to understand biotic interactions outside protected areas and human interactions with wildlife outside protected areas. So to me, that is the future. And we need to use that information to involve the communities and sort of conserve. The last and final one sentence is he made the point about how it's become very much an urban rich kids kind of sport. Some very good points over there. So in my auto work, we employ a fisherman and his name is Shivu. He is 20 times more knowledgeable than me, right? His biggest issue is he cannot speak English. Otherwise, he would be doing this webinar today, right?
Yes,
And
yes, sir, of course.
Shivu is my hero, right? I am the guy who's speaking on Shivu's behalf, but Shivu is my hero, right? And to me, conservation has to be grassroots. The Bishnois have to be the face of conservation. Shivu has to be the face of conservation. They are the people who are the future of conservation. We are the enablers. We are the guys who can get them the access to funds through projects. We can give them, the kind of material they can seek to conserve. Done. I'm done.
Yeah, that's what, sir. Because I worked in BRT, the Soligas we are taking as an assistant. So not assistant, we can call them as the leaders. They are doctors without PhD. Okay. So unless you told enablers. So unless some proper good conservationist has to enable those people to do at grassroots level, if it goes to pseudo conservationist hand, so it will go somewhere else. That's what my point. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mari, any questions on the chat box that you would want to post? Or should we go to the next part?
I think there was one question from Ashna. She was like, where are the, she had a question, where are the floricanes found? That's what her question was.
Right, Ms. Ashna. So the floricans are found mostly, the largest area where they are, found is in Rajasthan. And the irony is that it is only during the monsoons that you see these lesser floricans. And after that, they sort of disappear. We really didn't know. In fact, I think the research very recently, maybe a couple of months back, there was a radio tag fitted to one of the birds. And then we landed up to know that the bird was actually found in Madhya Pradesh. So maybe in the summer months and winter months, they spread across the Deccan Plateau, spend time there, hidden bushes, and then during the monsoon they come back to Rajasthan for their mating and breeding. So I hope that answers your question, Asha.
I think we will we'll stop the question session here, the interactive session.
Yeah.
Of course, there are a couple of questions. Somebody wants to ask a similar question what Dr. Parmesh was asking. And one Pritika has asked a question which says, what is the impact of wildlife conservation on mental health? Possibly that we could answer a little later.
Yeah, I think probably the wildlife in that section we'll talk about this.
Yeah, now it is 5:15 already. Maybe we only have about 15 minutes to finish the next part of it.
Right.
So we will go to the next part. Shall I move on?
Yeah. Yes, please. So part 4. I think next slide also, Dr. Prabhakar. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just a second. Yeah, wildlife. So should we, Gopaji, should we do the wildlife part right now? Or what would you suggest? The best practices first?
I think we can quickly finish this and do the wildlife for last.
Okay, done. Perfect. So yeah, so we'll quickly go through these best practices. They are like, as Dr. Pramesha was also, pointing out that a lot of times we are not really thinking about conservation. We're not really focusing on how species can be saved. And we should remember these 20 points are sort of observed and try to make it, into one single chart so that people can understand what these things are. First thing is you dressed appropriately. You shouldn't wear anything which is too bright or too colorful, because these actually appear to be threats to various birds and species. So it is best you dress in a dull way, maybe with a camouflage print, and that will help you to blend with the surroundings. So you appear to be less of a threat. You can observe more effectively and get better pictures as well. Second is preserving habitat. So preserving habitat means that when you are actually in a area, a lot of times photographers, especially, I've seen a lot of people, they cut down a bush or cut down a twig or make a particular area there for photography. This actually helps. This actually destroys a particular habitat. A bush which you just cut down could have been a nest for a generation of birds. Or maybe if you removed a particular twig or cut down a particular part of a area, that could have been a effective camouflage for a den of a fox. So these are things which we need to ensure that as a photographer, we do not touch habitat. Let it be the way it is. Let it be wild. We should adjust, maybe try shifting to a different angle and then try to, get a picture. Breeding nesting is another issue which is extremely important. That when we have the breeding season, it is extremely important that photographers, particularly photographers, are very, very sensitive to this particular part. We shouldn't go close to nests, and the reason is that the bird or the if it's a mammal that might get disturbed and so scared that it might actually abandon the nest. And what that will land up, the young one, the egg may not hatch, or if it's young one, it will not survive. So imagine just because of a mere presence, we have actually caused, an unnatural death. The other thing, which is more subtle again, is that when you're near the nest, you leave a scent behind, and this scent could attract potential predators. So the nest could have been very well camouflaged without our presence, but if you land up going too close, it might attract other predators, and when you go, the predator might attack to the nest which was otherwise hidden. So we should ensure that these places are, we shouldn't go very close to them. Try taking pictures. In fact, my rule is I don't take photographs of nests. It's the best thing to do. You should avoid those. They are very private, very intimate moments, and these are moments which actually help the species thrive. So we should avoid nesting photos. The next is using a silent shutter. Many cameras have this feature these days, so we should ensure that, especially when you are in a particular area which is particularly silent, use silent shutters, because these are sounds which the species may not be aware of, and they might get scared. So A, you will end up losing your subject; it will fly away or run away, and B, it will unnecessarily cause it stress. We should ensure that our actions don't cause these creatures to unnecessarily expend energy, which could have been used for saving themselves, for protecting their kids, or in feeding. So this is very important. The next is called limiting playback. Now, playback is a technique which is used especially by bird photographers. They have these calls and songs, and they play these sounds to attract birds, so they come up in the open and you can get a picture. Now, the downside to this is many times the playback can actually, cause breakups. If it's a male and a female and they're courting each other, they're about to reproduce, and if you play a song, the male or female might leave their partner in search of a better, so to say, a better partner. And this would land, and a partner which doesn't exist is just a speaker. So what happens is that this can lead to a problem in the population. So my rule is, do not use playbacks for anything which is endangered. You may use it for common birds or birds which are bold enough. That's fine, but then don't use it for birds which are endangered or rare. This is extremely important. The next is keeping it a secret. And the secret is that when you see an endangered species or a bird or mammal, then do not share it publicly. Try keeping that sighting as close to you as possible. The reason is, a lot of horde of photographers might land up in that place, may destroy that habitat, may cause unnecessary anxiety to the species. This is something which we normally we feel proud about. If we see a rare bird or something, we want to display it. You can display it, but keep the location a secret. Don't exactly disclose where it was found. Maybe in general terms, you could say it's a sanctuary or a particular district, but not the exact location. That actually helps to preserve its habitat and maintain its population. The other one is maintaining distance. And this is when you are too close to the subject, this will end up disturbing it. It might cause stress to it. It might cause it to behave in a particular way, which is not characteristic of it. So you should always make sure that you have these telephoto lens. Try being as far as possible. This will serve two purposes. A, you're not too close to the bird or the animal, and that way you can observe it from a distance, and it will continue doing its activities in a routine manner. So you can observe and you can get the joy of it feeding or mating or doing whatever it does in the day. And the other thing, of course, is being away helps the creature itself to be comfortable. The other thing in this, maintaining a distance is that do not approach it in a straight line. When you're going to a subject, go in a roundabout manner. That way the subject sort of feels, okay, he's taking a different track. He's not really coming towards me. And that way you're actually going a little closer, but at the same time not causing stress or anxiety to the subject. The next is following the law. Especially in a wildlife sanctuary or in a nature preserve or something like that, then there are certain guidelines, certain legal requirements which you need to do. For example, no flash photography, no littering, etc. So then follow those. That will help you not only not causing you to get into trouble. At the same time, these are mostly guidelines ensured to protect or preserve wildlife. So follow them. Then caption responsibly. Now, this is another thing. You've gone to the jungle, you've got a great photograph, and now you're just about to upload it on Facebook or Twitter, and get as many likes and comments you want. But one thing which which I particularly give a lot of attention to is captioning them. What do you want to convey through that photograph? That's very important, especially if you follow these guidelines, especially if you've done something ethically. You've got a great photograph. Why don't you tell people you were ethical about it? See, somebody who does it unethically will never say that I, did something unethical and got this photograph. Then at least be ethical. The person who's done something correctly should ensure that that is spread. This will ensure that other people also get inspired and they know that there's a right way to go about it. There's not necessarily, a negative connotation to it. So captioning is very important. Describe the species you saw, and maybe in a line or two, tell or communicate to the audience that this is how I, restrained myself. I followed these ethical practices, best practices, and made sure that the species wasn't disturbed. And the last and most intuitive best practice is think like wildlife. How would you, like if there's a giant trotting around your house, peeking into windows and trying to, capture you or your kids? How would you feel? You would feel threatened. So that's exactly what wildlife does too. It feels, it feels scared. It feels anxious. So make sure that you don't stress it out unnecessarily. And we'll probably do that in the don't section as well. So the white points were the do's, what you need to do. The other one is don'ts, and we'll go through them very quickly. First is don't distress wildlife, which is if you feel that there's a bird which is causing an alarm call, or there's an animal which is not too comfortable with your presence, leave that place. You are a guest in the in the forest. You need to respect their space, their privacy, and hence maybe after a photograph or two, you should just move to another spot. The other one is don't crowd. This is typically very important, that when you're going, a group of, let's say 3 or 4, whenever you approach a subject, try to stay in a single line. This will ensure that the creature sees you as one cohesive unit rather than 4 potential threats. So what happens is that if you spread out and you're surrounding the target or the subject, it'll see that there are so many threats around it, and it might behave unpredictably. It might attack you. It might suddenly run away. In either case, it's never a pleasant reaction. So imagine you being hounded by 10 different people who you don't know. So you can just understand that you either go in a small group, maybe 1 or 2, or if you are in a couple of more number of people, then try maintaining a single file. Then don't chase. This is extremely important, and we've heard so many instances from across the country that photographers especially, they chase a particular subject, a bird or an animal, and unless it's till it's exhausted and finally settles down, and then that's when you conquer it by your camera. But that's really the most degrading thing you would do. Imagine the side effects. Supposing you chase a particular subject and it's exhausted, and what if a predator comes right the next second? Would it be able to run or fly? No, it's probably expended all that energy by being chased by you. So it won't have anything left to save itself. So imagine, because of one single photograph or a frame, you're actually endangering the very life of a subject. So we have to ensure that you don't chase these birds. The other one is don't litter. This is self-explanatory. You make sure that if there's plastic lying around, you clean it up. In fact, never throw around food wrappers when you're in a sanctuary, or even otherwise. If possible, carry a disposable garbage bag or gloves with you. So if you do find something which is unsavory, why don't you just pick it up and throw it later? So that's always the right thing to do. And don't manhandle. Now, this is especially important for those who are into macro photography. Do not pick up reptiles or insects or creatures, sometimes even little birds or fledglings, because manhandling puts them in a very stressful situation. They're not able to understand what's happening. They might bite you. And more importantly, there can be so many infections which might spread from you to them or vice versa. So imagine if a particular, let's say, fungal infection spreads to a single population of birds, it's enough to wipe out the local population. So imagine what we are, at the cost of what. So let them be in the natural element, photograph them as they are. That's always, gives you the best photographs, I feel. Then don't provoke or bait. This is very important, especially for larger animals. If you provoke them by teasing them, or let's say by throwing a stone in order to elicit a reaction, or let's say you clap or make some noise for the bird to fly. These are all examples of physical torture to them. Unnecessarily, we are asking them to spend their energy and fly here or there just because we need a shot. So wait for it, spend some time, be a little bit patient. I am sure that if your presence is not too objectionable to them, they will land up doing their business and they will land up giving you memorable shots. So don't provoke them. More importantly, don't feed them. And this is what we discussed earlier also, that feeding wildlife is something which should be avoided at all costs. Because A, the food which you provide them would not suit their systems. B, the dependence of these creatures on us for food will cause their basic instincts to hunt to be eroded. And this will land up collapsing the entire population. 3, and very importantly, the dependence which we create would land up causing these creatures to venture into human territories. And if they're harmful, well, they might be man-animal conflict. And if they're not, well, then in any case, they're exposing themselves from their usual habitats. So why should we, encourage them to behave in such a way which endangers them? So it's always best never to feed them. Don't speed, which is that when you're in a vehicle, do not unnecessarily speed across the jungle. It creates sound, it creates disturbance. It's not required. Again, no noise, please, which means that you should switch off your mobile phones. You shouldn't play music. You shouldn't gossip. You shouldn't laugh. You're in a protected, hallowed place. It's something which is heavenly. And we are lucky to witness these, last bastions of places where wildlife is thriving. So we should ensure that we pay that much of deference, that much of respect, and don't unnecessarily create noise. And lastly, no flashes, especially in night photography, when you're photographing nocturnal species like, let's say, the small-clawed otter, or let's say some nightjars or the loris. What happens is that they can temporarily or even permanently blinded, and this may land up, entirely their survival becomes questioned. So if you're following these, guidelines, then I would say that yes, you are a conservationist, you are a wildlife photographer with a purpose, and these things you should highlight in your work as well. So I hope I haven't taken too much time, or if I have, it's already gone. So Gopaji, please continue.
No, very well done. Thank you. I think you brought up some really important points. They are a number of points, yes, but every one of them is very important. And when I see them in the field, I realize the value of what you're saying, right? And I'm very grateful also to have friends who are wonderful, wildlife photographers and conservationists, right? I'm going to bring up 4 principles.
Gopa, can I take a minute?
Yes.
Yeah, see, there is some little housekeeping announcement that I need to make. Also, I should tell you that the time is running away, so you may have to possibly cut down a little on what you want to say. That's one thing. The other is I have put the feedback forms. This is for everybody. I have put the feedback forms on the chat box. Kindly take the feedback forms. And the request to the students of the colleges, you can send in the forms tomorrow, because the feedback forms are linked to the e-certificates, and in a day we can only generate about 100 certificates. So students of the college, please send the feedback tomorrow so that you will get your certificates. We'll enable people who are not students of the college to finish their work today. That will save time and effort from them to send a mail and request for it. But please continue to be in the meeting.
So I will take not more than 2 minutes, Prabhakar.
No, you can take more than that, but just a little thing I want.
Because I think he's actually covered in the process of this. He's covered a number of points. So the first point I want to make, those of you who in this group who are interested in wildlife research and the ethics of research, doing research for the sake of research is passé. It was history. Today, doing research, and I want to be quite strong with due apologies, doing research to publish a paper or to get recognition in the academic community as far as wildlife is concerned is best not done. If you're doing research, have just one goal, which is how can that research result in conservation outcomes of species or habitat, both of which are related. Yes, Prabhakar, let's move on to the second one about funds, which is because these funds typically come from outside, treat it like your own, treat it very carefully. Nobody gives money for otters, I must tell you that, or very few people have done, and we've been very cautious. Most of the money that we put in comes from our pockets, and we treat it very carefully because it's from our pockets. Can we treat donor funds that way, right? Keep an open mind, Prabhakar, that's a third point. I think to me, this is very critical because you could go in with a hypothesis that could be completely wrong, right? And very often people get married or wedded to a certain hypothesis, right? So I'll give you an example. There is a hypothesis that is that otters cannot survive where there are fishermen, right? And I have seen that hypothesis as being universally false,
False.
locally true. It could be true for maybe 2 or 3 areas, but to say that this is true for otters in general is nonsense. You know why? Because there are places where actually we have, in fact, one particular site I'm referring to, where the density of otters is about 2.5 times the normal density, these kind of abundance we see, because the otters have made it a habit to steal fish off the nets. And that is actually increasing conflict with fishers, with fishermen. But to say that otters and fishermen don't operate in the same landscape could be wrong. So keep an open mind and be very open to criticism. The more you're open to criticism, the more you are robust as far as science goes. The best science is the one that you can say, open up and say, can you find faults in it? And that would be the hallmark of a real learning researcher. And my last point is, please document everything. Write down and document everything, not mobile photos, which are accessories. Mobile photos are accessories. Raghav's kind of photography, which is 2, 3, 4 steps beyond the mobile photograph, is what you would use to make your point. So document and write down what you see, even if you think it is not relevant, right? And for us, the classic element here is the relationship between small clawed or short clawed otters and crabs. And in fact, our studies have shown that where crabs are absent because of pesticide usage, and I'm now referring to, many of you know the Brahmagiris Hills, which is a border between Karnataka and Kerala. On the Kerala side, the actual usage of chemical pesticides is much higher. You have much lower percentage or much lower, if you do random kind of sampling of crabs, the abundance of crabs, you see it's a fraction. And if you see small clawed otters, it's also a fraction. Right? So for us, the conservation of small clawed otters would begin with looking at organic agriculture. But of course, that's a very tough battle we have not been able to get into. With that, with these 4 principles, I'm done, Prabhakar.
Right.
Now we will have, we can take a few questions. And there's one question that I'm seeing here, and Nazneen Abbas has raised the hand. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Nazneen Abbas. I have done my MSc in Biodiversity and Conservation from Delhi.
Amazing.
Yeah, there is a course. So I'm very much convinced by the statement that Gopa sir made, that is, everyone can be a conservationist. But we cannot run away from the fact that the wildlife conservation field is lacking in terms of jobs. So what is the thing that we can make to encourage the youngsters to stick to this profession? And what is the thing we can make them to encourage them to take up these courses?
Okay.
So Raghav, destiny. We skipped part 3 and now we have the question with us.
Yeah. So Nazneen, bahut shukriya, and thank you for that question. I'm very glad you asked that. In fact, like Raghav said, that is the one element that is left for us to cover. So may I start, Raghav, with a brief 1 minute?
Yes.
So Nazneen, to answer your question, and for your question also is probably the question on the minds of many people in this call right now. The answer to that question in a nutshell is, wildlife careers are not for everybody for various reasons, including the funds availability, the kind of hiring that is done by the larger NGOs and the smaller NGOs in the country. But as you said, everybody can be a conservationist. To me, this is not my career, but this is actually, it has become my career, but this is not how I started. Likewise for Raghav, maybe at some stage after his retirement, he will become a full-fledged conservationist. But today what he has done is he is using, if I may say so, he is using a full-time job
Absolutely.
as a means for livelihood, as a means for personal growth in a different area. And then on weekends, his free time, he is using conservation as something that really charges him up and gives back to society, right? Um, my suggestion is, if there is a possibility where you can combine the two, there is nothing like that, right? You don't have to be spending months and months inside national parks necessarily. Some people have to do it, but not everybody has to do it. You could spend time outside protected areas looking at species that are not on the mainstream of conservationists, understanding issues of threats, even on weekends, weekdays in the mornings, evenings, and so on. Right? Interestingly, BNHS, Bombay Natural History Society, started that way. It started as a hobby club.
Right.
So most of us can be that and maintain a full-time job and not be dependent on funding from NGOs internationally or otherwise. And that way, we will also do so much more justice to ourselves. Rather than busy writing up necessarily, proposals, etc., we will probably create greater impact if we work with communities and so on.
Actually land up working on the ground reality. Absolutely correct. That's true. We always have that option. So I hope that that answers your question, Nazneen.
Yeah, because I personally did my 6 months dissertation walking in the forest and then putting up so much effort, and till now we are not getting any fixed job for this. And I know I got moved by those 6 months fieldwork too much that I want to pursue my career in this, but then you don't find any opportunity, then you feel heartless, and then you shift to some other thing. So that makes something like that, no?
There's just one thing, that there's something beyond all of this discussion, is never to lose hope. It's only on the the idea that something good can happen, can be. So don't worry about it. Maybe it's a challenge right now, and as we said, you focus and try to getting a steady source of income through a fixed job. May not be necessarily linked exactly with wildlife. It could be something a little or maybe very different. But if you're true to your purpose, you land up. It's your true calling. You will land up going there. So I think that's very important.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So being a wildlifer actually means reading up and understanding about the species or the habitat. It means commitment rather than necessarily occupation and funds.
Correct.
And that was a point that Prabhakar, Raghav, and I all sort of agree with, and many students of Joseph's who pass out as well. You don't need to be professional wildlifers. You can be, hobbyist wildlifers and make a big impact. The entire Amul Falcon program that Raghav spoke about was driven by people who are outside the sort of conservation mainstream, right? In fact, if everybody goes to a website which is called rare.org, you see campaigns which is to instill local pride, which is completely, what they do? They use puppets, they use mascots, they use rock music, they use folk music to build conservation around the species. And it works beautifully. Right? If Nazneen, if you are good at art, if you are good at working with communities, you can use those skills far more effectively in conservation than, let's say, if you have to do research and are struggling with that because you're not able to get the funds for it. The website is rare.org, right? And it really profiles campaigns which are done to instill pride in community. Yes, Raghav, over to you.
Yeah.
Now there are two more people who are waiting to ask questions. Yes. One is Mr. Anguraj and one Mr. Karthik Gokhale. After we finish with the people who have raised their hands, we can ask our Kumari to take the questions from the chat box.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Mr. Anguraj, you can ask your question now.
Yes, sir. Good evening to one and all.
Good evening.
It was a very fascinating talk. My question is are the photographers becoming too competitive today that they forget the motive of conservation in the first place? And also coming to the bioacoustics, the technology-based tracking devices. So like how Raghav sir showed the photographs, I know the HD pictures are all very fascinating to see, but what we forget is if we use a technology-based hidden camera or something, sensor detectors, we would have a lesser quality of picture. I totally agree to it. But what our motto is of documentation. So we reduce the human interference into the wildlife. and we also get we achieve our motto of getting documented of the animals. So what is your perspective on this, sir?
It's a very interesting perspective, Anuragji, and I think it's a very valid point you're making, that how camera traps can actually, in fact, more often than not, in fact, many remote areas, the ones which are not accessible to humans, this is the actual method to to sort of, in fact, the photograph which Gopaji also showed, the small clawed otter, was through a camera trap. But the human element, I'll tell you why the human element becomes relevant. Sometimes a camera trap, let's say, is placed in a situation which is rigid, it really can't move. And let's say the subject is moving and you need to track the subject along its habitat. So you need a actual presence of a person who's able to walk maybe at a distance, as following the ethical principles, to ensure that that particular creature or that bird is being tracked in real-time basis. So the problem becomes real-time tracking. That's a little bit of a challenge with camera trap, because they tend to be a little more static. And the other thing is the artistic or the aesthetic part of it, that a lot of times, as you said, that you would want to frame a particular picture you want to convey a message. So sometimes the camera trap, which is more research oriented, more statistically oriented, would not be able to give you let's say, an aesthetically relevant photograph. And that visually a photograph which is convincing, which is persuasive, can actually send a far important message in society, or to policymakers, or to stakeholders. So that is how photography as a tool, aesthetic tool, becomes relevant. At the larger.
I want to just build on one point that Raghav is saying, right? Yeah. And many of you may actually find this really odd, but I want to say that conservationists, when you're working with people, you have to look at yourself as a storyteller, right? Photography is a fantastic storytelling tool. I mean, for those of you who have, taken photographs or seen, for example, the Great Indian Hornbill, right? Or the Malabar Pied Hornbill, 2 examples just of hornbills, right? Or, you can take the Tragopan, right? Now, these are tools that you use, these photographs are tools that you use to tell communities stories and to create stories that touch them emotionally. The science that you do on the ground has to be converted into an emotional story that people can relate to. Science by itself doesn't move people to conserve. Science moves governments and forest departments to conserve. But if you want people to conserve, you have to tell stories. And these stories can be told using images, which could be puppets, it could be photographs, it could be mascots. When we do work on otters, we actually, in fact, I have a game which I play with school kids, where they, some of them are otters and some of them are fish, right? And they have great fun, and we have fun watching them do it. And we use that as a way to tell them about how important the fish are for the otters. Because while we are playing the game, we slowly remove the fish one by one. And then we see the otters actually, chasing all the remaining fish, right? And it becomes a way to tell a game. So you have to be a storyteller, right? And I know in this group of 150, there would be at least 50 storytellers. So why are you not a conservationist? You are a conservationist. There you are.
Absolutely.
Can we now request Mr. Karthik Gokhale to ask his question?
Yeah. Hello. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, I wanted to ask, as you both mentioned about feral dogs. So, what problems do they really cause? Like, I have heard about the presence of the hybrids of Indian wolves and dogs in the places around Deccan Plateau. Or maybe we say that the leopards are more attracted to rural areas due to these dogs, the presence of these dogs, as they are easy prey. So are the NGOs that are working for these feral dogs, and I mean feral dogs or cows, really not doing a great job, as we have seen in the pandemic situation? They are feeding them and are responsible for an outburst in their population. So what are your comments on this?
Yeah, Karthik, Raghav, may I take that quickly? Because so we are a little short of time, Karthik. I will do 2 things. I will quickly answer that by saying, to get a detailed answer to the problems of feral dogs, please go to a website called conservationindia.org. Conservationindia.org, in which there are detailed articles with photographs which will give you an idea of 7-8 problems that they cause, not just one. So that is one. Second, I don't know about whether NGOs are doing a good job or a bad job. That I honestly don't know, frankly. But here's what you could do. Educate people, right? People, see, feral dogs are not completely feral. They, in rural areas, they're sort of loosely attached to a farmer or to somebody who's feeding them. Okay? So please educate people, and that is the basis for changing behavior. If they want to, then the feral dogs will not go and kill. It's because they are not bothered, and therefore they don't realize that this is the impact, right? So take it up. So even though it's a boring job and it's not a very exciting thing to do, it's a very important thing to do. Sorry, Raghav, I grabbed that from you, but I wanted to.
Yeah, this is more or less self-explanatory. And Karthik, there's a program by the government called the Animal Birth Control, ABC. And that's what the ABC program is being done by almost all NGOs, where the neutering of these dogs is done. Now, this is a long-term process, so it takes some time, but eventually it is happening at the ground level. A lot of places actually working out also. So this needs to be done at a pilot basis at different locations, understanding the ground reality, and then the ABC program is successful. So that's how.
Also, Google for feral dogs attacking wildlife. You'll see photographs after photographs.
Oh, yes.
You can use those photographs in your conservation program.
Yeah, they destroy. Feral dogs is a major challenge for a lot of wildlife. Especially any little young animal can be attacked potentially by a dog. So yes, there you have it.
Kumari, can you please take over?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So Disha Ghoshal has a question to Raghav, sir. Yeah. What are your experiences with the critically endangered Bengal floricanes, and what are the probable measures for their conservation?
Okay, so Bengal floricans, I have been unlucky, Disha. I haven't yet seen a Bengal florican, but I would like to tell you that there are the bustard family, the Great Indian bustard, the McQueen bustard, the Lesser florican, and the Bengal florican. These are 4 major birds which are in the bustard family. All of them are endangered. And the main reason is they are all dwellers of grasslands. Now, grasslands, as you would know, is one of the least priorities accorded by, by society as a whole, by governments, because typically we see grasslands as wastelands or lands which can be easily converted to agricultural lands or commercial lands, or let's say residential complexes, etc. But these birds and many others are actually being driven away from grasslands. Thankfully, now we have the status of birds report, which has actually highlighted these issues. And I think the plan is underway to preserve these grasslands and make them protected areas as well, because this hasn't happened earlier. Grasslands, even wetlands have to a certain extent some protection, let's say under the Ramsar Convention. But grasslands per se do not have any protection as of now. So that is a priority. Once we conserve the habitats, Bengal floricans and other birds would be preserved. So that's my current status.
Yeah, there are 2 other questions. One is, I have told you the question earlier. What impact does wildlife or wildlife conservation have on the mental health? Was one thing. That question came up sometime early. There is another question which Ms. Tanvi Agarwal has asked. How can conservationists working on the field engage with broader political economy of extraction, which is the root driver of environmental degradation?
Right.
So those 2 questions.
Which ones are we answering both partly?
So the first one on mental health, I'm afraid I'm really entirely not competent to answer that question.
Okay.
And
I have some thoughts, but go Vajaya.
Okay. Tanvi is also a friend and Prabhakar's very valued student from St. Joseph. So Tanvi and many others who would answer that question. So a conservationist, for example, could, the problem today with extraction as an industry, as when we say extraction, she's speaking in the largest context, not just mining as possibility, but the political economy of extraction, right? There are no short answers, very tough to give you a sort of 1-sentence answer to this. But let me give you an optimistic view, Tanvi. Let me not be pessimistic like people often are. Right? By the way, if you are a pessimistic person, conservation makes you more pessimistic, right? So please don't be pessimistic, be optimistic. My point is, please go back to the 1970s, 50 years ago, when I was a little child, and come to today, right? In those days, tiger was something that you shot because it was a problem. Until the early 70s, tigers were seen as an issue, right? Dams were coming up all over the country. Grasslands were completely out of them. Nobody even thought of conserving anything. But the human population within the country and the development process hadn't reached this far. Today, on a larger point I want to make is, along with the growth of population and extraction, yes, there has been tremendous environmental degradation. We all know that, accept it. I'm telling you what we all know. But there's also been awareness. Newspapers cover it. Magazines, Monger Bay, for example, Down to Earth, Sanctuary, these are mainstream today. People read them. Social media talks about it, right? When there is an issue of extraction, people really speak up, right? And just as in the last 6 months, I personally have seen and have been part of groups, and I've seen the kind of outroar and outrage on multiple issues, right? And the resultant change that we have seen, right? The RA forest colony is one example. It is just one example of many examples of positive thinking, right? So all I can say to counter that is, please remain positive and optimistic, and say that let me do what I can, and let me not get driven by the pessimism that is so all pervasive otherwise. Don't read the newspaper. It's all bullshit most of the time. It's so pessimistic, right? I would rather be optimistic in interactions with society and people and wildlife, right? Having said that, let me hand it over to Raghav.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gopaji. Very well spoken. There's hardly anything to add, because it's a very good answer, that positivity and working towards wildlife conservation environment is something which requires a little bit of effort from our personal level, and at the same time we have to appreciate the idea that as a developing country, we need sustainable development. There will be challenges on both sides, but we have to make sure that we at least highlight these issues. As we said, talking about tigers and grasslands, there's so many varieties of topics which we have been talking about, and there are many international agreements and conventions which we are party to. So now we are sort of moving into the direction that these are no longer issues which don't matter. They are there in the fore and they are being addressed. So all we need to do is make sure that we as individuals and as a society work towards them. And regarding the mental health, well, I think personally it's a therapeutic treatment. Being around wildlife will actually help you focus better in your day-to-day work. It will help you de-stress. That is the important thing. That after at least that's what by my personal experience, I can tell you that the entire week could be week full of work, extra work hours, hectic work, etc. And at the end, when you're in the fields or in the jungle or on the mountain or wherever you choose to be, you will see that unwinding, and that is important. That's more important than anything else. That getting therapeutic treatment from wildlife. But that's something which happens.
Thank you. Lovely. Raghav, I think listening to you has been an education. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Thanks to you, Gopaji. I mean, I'm just novice. You are the one who has experts.
Now the time is 5:54.
Yes.
I know there are a couple of questions also. Sorry that we don't have the time.
Yes.
We will not. I've looked at the questions, yes, but I'm not sending it on to the speakers.
Right.
This is already, 2 hours almost now. Would you all want to say something else, or can I ask for?
Well, a very patient audience. There are still 134.
Yes, exactly. Very appreciative of them, and it turned out to be a longer session than what we expected it to be, and they stuck with us right to the end. So that's it's very humbling, and we are very happy that you listen to us. And
can I really call Monica Reddy to propose the vote of thanks?
Yes, please. There's just one courses and wildlife thing. Maybe you can just quickly.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, sir. That I forgot.
The kids can take a, the students, if they want to study more, they can just take a snapshot of this. this is some of the courses which I've come across during my studies in wildlife, etc. And these are excellent courses. This is something which does some value addition to you. You will end up learning more about what biodiversity conservation is, how do we do it at ground levels, what strategies do we use, and otherwise technically understanding how creatures behave and how birds behave. So this is very important. Courses of wildlife, have a look at them.
Perfect. Lovely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Monica Reddy, can you please come over?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. I wish a warm evening to our worthy faculty, participants, and my dear fellow volunteers. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks speech and acknowledge the contribution of those who worked hard to make this web discussion on the topic Conversation on Conservation. On behalf of the Environmental Science Department, I would like to express our immense gratitude towards the principal, Reverend Father Dr. Victor Lobo, SJ, and the college management for providing us with a platform to execute our event and this project effortlessly. I extend a hearty vote of thanks to our guest of honors, Mr. Gopakumar Menon and Mr. Raghav Gupta, who spared us their valuable time to grace this occasion and address the gathering. I have to thank Raghav sir for helping us gain valuable insights on wildlife biology with your beautiful photography skills, making known to us just how much we miss and we students deeply admire your admiration for these animals. And most of all, thank you for highlighting the problems that we cause while coexisting with them. You also talked about how not to disturb animals and preserve their habitat while taking photographs, and asked us to think like wildlife, which would be really useful for students enthusiastic about wildlife photography. And Mr. Gopakumar Menon, your love for these cute creatures shows through very well. Through you, we have gained some knowledge about them and the protection of otters and their habitat, and also the misconceptions related to it. The question and answer session was truly educational. I would use this platform to extend our gratitude to our HOD, Dr. B.S. Prabhakar sir, for his support and efforts towards this event. I would like to sincerely thank the teachers of our college for encouraging and inspiring us. Your generosity and thoughtfulness is always appreciated. I need to mention my deepest sense of appreciation towards the environmental science students who volunteered and worked very hard on all fronts, technical and organizational, in order to pull this event off gracefully. I would also like to thank the audience for their active participation in the same. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I will have to say one word with your permission. After the vote of thanks, generally people are not allowed to talk. But for me, this was a session of a young person with a lot of energy and initiatives being polished by a mature veteran in the field. I would want my students to learn both these facets and put into their learning skills, which will be useful for them later.
Prabhakar sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Parmesh here. So nice, discussion, Raghav sir and Gopakumar sir. Better we'll keep in touch and do more things in conservation field. Really happy to listen both of you.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Sir, there is the detail of their contact.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Please take that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Possibly take a screenshot, that will help you.
And the website which Gopaji mentioned, www.rare.org.
That I put it on the chat box already.
Yeah. So people can have a look at that as well. And thank you so much, Dr. Prabhakar, Dr.
That was my pleasure, sir.
Department of Environmental Science, Prakriti, Monica, everybody who's worked so hard, and of course the audience who's been very patient, who's stayed till the end. But my special thanks to Gopaji, who was such an excellent co-guest, I would say, and we had a wonderful time learning about what he's been doing, and of course we'll stay in touch. And I'm be coming soon and clicking otters with you.
Likewise, sentiments reciprocated heartily.
Yeah. Don't forget me when both of you are going.
Oh yes, Prabhakar hasn't come to the Cauvery region, so we'll take him along this time.
Yes.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Shall I now end the session?
Yes. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Yes. Thank you, Raghav.